What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my F122 MyTeam career. This is episode 19 here in our first season in the F1 paddock as the newest team on the grid. And this week we are heading to Mexico for the Mexican Grand Prix. We are coming off of a pretty reasonably well result in COTA there in Austin, Texas in the US Grand Prix. A very, very successful weekend for us as we now look to have a very quick turnaround for the Mexican Grand Prix, choosing wisely for our activities for the week and continuing to try and push and make some strides in this game. It is going to be continually a struggle for us to continue to improve in the R&D chart here as we get our next major upgrade going. That engine cover for the chassis is going to be an absolutely godsend for us as we continue to try and make up as much ground as possible, as we know that there is a lot to continue working on. We do still have a few ports that need to be adapted. Otherwise, we run the risk of losing them or incurring some kind of penalty. I'm not sure. But nonetheless, we will get those done. As we take a look now at our R&D chart, we can see that we made a huge jump more towards the middle of the pack, once again kind of leaving Williams a little bit further down. So we are continuing to make strides now that we're moving in towards our major upgrade. So we are definitely continuing to make strides, and we are looking forward to finally joining the hunt there in the midfield as we will advance time here towards our weekend here. We will skip the Pirelli hot lap, mainly just because I find them very boring and really just kind of grind them out until I get the gold medal. So we'll take that 300,000 and the 1,000 driver claim that comes with it, and we will move on here into quali here around Mexico. We head into Q1 here. This will be our best lap here towards the end of Q1. We'll make our way down the main straight, activating DRS, making sure we get out ahead of, I believe that's either an AlphaTauri who made his way out of the pit lane almost right alongside us. Thankfully, we don't get impeded at all by him. And so we will make our way here through the first fast left to right section on our way into the end of the first sector here, down this back straight towards this another little left right section as we make our way towards the weirdest little corner ever, as we get held up a little bit here by Kevin Magnussen, who just can't decide whether or not he's on a push lap or not. We make our way around this little double right-hander. I found actually very awkward to try and navigate over the course of not only quali, but in the race as well, as we'll see. But it's a very odd little double right, but also very tight, but not necessarily hairpin either, as we struggle to get the car turned in there on the quick little S section as we make our way towards the second DRS zone, opening up the rear wing, making our way towards the stadium section, making the right-hand turn into this little courtyard of all of the fans around us, getting a great view as we make our exit heading towards the last right-hander. We will turn in, run a little wide, very understeer. We'll lose about a tenth to, maybe a few hundredths there as we will cross the line up into P13. And it was not a very good lap from us. And as you'll see here, unfortunately, it won't be enough, as P17 is all that awaits us here for the Mexican Grand Prix. So we're going to have a lot of work to do on race Sunday, as we'll take a look at the final results here. Carlos Sainz ends up going pole, and we'll make our way down. Oscar Piastri ends up finishing in P20 there. So we're hoping to continue to push towards giving him a better car and us a better car as well. But nonetheless, it is out for Q1 for us. And now we have to move on towards race Sunday, as we'll take a look at the starting grid, as Lando Norris actually will come home to start on P1, even though he did not take pole here, with Charles Leclerc also occupying the front row thanks to some late season engine penalties. We'll see this a lot these last few rounds here as the Mercedes take up the second row. Fernando Alonso, Valtteri Bottas, Pierre Gasly, and Kevin Magnussen. Yuki Tsunoda and Sebastian Vettel rounding out the top 10. Lance Stroll and Max Verstappen on P11 and 12. We will actually start in P13 thanks to all of the engine penalties. As you can see there, Sainz, who was on pole, finds himself in P16 today, as well as Sergio Perez. And Oscar actually moves up one spot to P19, as Esteban Ocon will take a penalty as well and finish up the grid there. So we are very much a beneficiary of some generous engine penalties. But as you can see here, it looks like quite a wet start for this Mexican Grand Prix, as we'll make our way around on the formation lap. You can see everyone starting on the green striped intermediate tires, and this was something we were not expecting as I forgot to look at the weather forecast for this race before it started, and so we find ourselves with a wet Mexican Grand Prix here, and it's going to be very interesting, especially considering we find ourselves starting further down the grid than we might have in the past couple of episodes, as we found our car to be quite a good qualifying car. But nonetheless, we are going to have to make some things happen in the great equalizer that is the rain, with a McLaren starting on the front row and a Ferrari standing next to him. We're going to have to make a lot of moves here, as the rain and the lack of DRS specifically, especially for our car, which really truly kind of lacks that straight line speed that's necessary to really truly defend without DRS. It's going to be a great equalizer for us, especially. So if we can make up some easy places in the beginning part of this race, in these opening stretch down towards turn 1, it will be absolutely huge. So as we go to 5 red lights here in Mexico, we are away and lights are out, and we are on our way down. As you can see, Max Verstappen there starting on our right is a very okay start for us, taking a peek behind, making your way towards the inside of what will be the inside of turn 1. You can see Lance Stroll gets an absolutely horrific start, as the Red Bull as well as Daniel Ricciardo make their way up the right side. We'll make a late lunge right up the inside, trying to find and poke our way there, making our way through the apex of the corner, and now finding ourselves on the outside of turn 2, but the inside of turn 3, and we actually find ourselves in P10, placing our car in the perfect position to weave our way through that right, left, rights short chicane section, and we find ourselves running in the top 10 here in Mexico on this opening lap, in a very, very wet opening lap. And we find ourselves following the Haas of Kevin Magnussen and the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo going side by side through this tight right-hander hairpin-esque section. And we find ourselves leading Yuki Tsunoda behind, who will absolutely be trying to make his way up into our position as we run very wide, very understeery in all of this rain. We don't get the car turned in, and that will be the downfall of us, is if we don't get that figured out, as this this S section, which we had so much trouble in that last qualification lap that we showed. We find ourselves very much in the danger zone here of falling back from the front pack and kind of falling into the clutches of the secondary pack. And so we definitely need to try and focus up and get settled in here in this weather. We definitely didn't get an opportunity to practice in the wet, and we definitely had a very, very dry qualification session, and so this is something that we have yet to really experience. So we definitely set our car up more for a dry circuit and then a wet one, and so very understeery here. As we move forward here to the beginning of lap 6, not a lot has really changed. You can see that Lance Stroll and Yuki Tsunoda have swapped places, although Stroll still finds himself about a second behind us, and we are trying to hold on to the back of the Haas of Kevin Magnussen. We are continually keeping an eye on the weather forecast just in case it will dry up, as we definitely want to try and take advantage of hopping on these slick tires early if we can handle it, and that will truly set us up for success if we can manage to undercut all of those ahead of us, as they will then eventually need to make that stop, as we send a very daring move around the outside of Kevin Magnussen there on that left-hand turn and kind of squeeze onto the inside here. So it's a very, very reckless move, some might say, as we are very late on the brakes and make a quick decision to just try and make the move on the Haas stick, and we manage to get the car rotated in there. Then we find ourselves up one more position now, up into P9, chasing the back of the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo about 1.5 seconds up the road, trying to put as much distance behind us as we can before we start to look into making our first pit stop and continually trying to get settled into this weather. I think it has definitely been a case of so far that we definitely settled in to kind of the feeling of the car, but we're still trying to find that true pace on these intermediate tires, as Charles Leclerc sets the fastest lap here at the end of lap 6. And we definitely want to try and move up as quickly as possible, potentially trying to use a little bit of ERS here as we move back towards the main straight and trying to hold on to this front pack and not get left in the dust. Moving ahead here, doubling our lap count, as Charles Leclerc once again sets the fastest lap here in this Grand Prix. Lap 14, we find ourselves still chasing the back of the McLaren and Daniel Ricciardo. We've managed to build a bit of a buffer behind, almost 2 full seconds to the Haas of Kevin Magnussen. And so we find ourselves kind of in a weird in-between section here, as the rain is still very much falling here in Mexico City. We are doing our best to deploy some ERS and try and claw our way up towards the back of the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo, just so we can try and hold on and get sort of a tow through this rain and this weather, as we are continuing to, make rounds as we near the midway point of this race. You can see the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly there ahead of Daniel, as I'm sure Daniel is itching to get around the AlphaTauri himself. But for us at least, we are feeling pretty good at this point, running P8, one of our favorite positions this season. We find ourselves running here pretty consistently, thankfully to some very solid results from us and some very quick decisions this season to find ourselves lucky enough to be in P8. But that said, we want more, and we know we have to continue pushing if we want to find better results in this. But we also know that there's a fine line between improvement and disaster. And so with this wet weather, we are very much content to try and hold on as best we can through these tight left-right sections that gave us so much trouble early in the race and continues to give us trouble here as we eventually just don't even attempt to make the corner, as Charles Leclerc continues to set faster laps and faster laps as we'll make our way down towards the stadium section. Once again, still holding on to Daniel Ricciardo as closely as possible and trying to make sure that we are in a position, should they make a mistake, to kind of pounce on them, as we have ever been someone to do, as our back end steps out there on the exit of that corner, and very, very nearly we go tumbling around the order here. So as we finish lap 15, we have a long way to go. So unfortunately, that little snap of oversteer definitely seemed to cause us issues as we get that all so important message that we've been waiting for from our race engineer, saying that the track seems to be drying. It seems like the rain has been letting up, and so the track is noticeably becoming drier. And so now we are trying to keep an eye on that weather even more closely than before. We don't want to be late towards the party of moving onto slicks, and if at all possible, we want to be early as we now move ahead to the end of lap 17. Reaching the midway point here, we can see everyone boxing, and so we will actually dive into the pits behind them. We've been kind of waiting to see the AI dive in at the earliest moment, and so we do find ourselves with our pit window open, but we are heading in a little early here as we are moving on to, and you can see the rest of the grid here moving on to the slick tires. So the medium yellow striped tires move on, and we unfortunately come out actually fused with the AlphaTauri Pierre Gasly and actually get shunted out the back. I find that a little odd and a little unfair, but nonetheless, we find ourselves still running in P8 now on a fresh set of new medium slick tires. And this is an opportunity to make some magic happen as we actually send one right up the inside of an unsuspecting Pierre Gasly. A little bit of oversteer there on these new cold, hard, medium tires, I should say. And we now find ourselves up one more position thanks to a bit of luck and a bit of an unsuspecting AlphaTauri driver. And now this is the moment we've been waiting for. We definitely feel more confident on these slick tires, but you can tell that they are definitely not up to temperature, as we really just cannot seem to find enough grip to make the turns and make the rotations that we need in these corners. And so we are definitely going to have to be extra careful here, as we definitely don't want to lose the back end or the front end and run a little wide, as that can ruin everyone's day here. As you can see, DRS becomes enabled here midway through lap 18, the midway point in this race, and we find ourselves now losing some ground to Daniel Ricciardo, but trying to do our best to warm up these medium tires as quickly as possible and try and make a bit of a march should we be able to. Trying there, you can see that they just can't, the front tires just don't want to seem to rotate through the car, and I think this is definitely a bit of an inkling, and it's definitely something to do with our car more than the circuit itself, as our car has always been a little understeery when you don't get the foot in the back end to try and rotate the car through. So our car definitely suffers from a lot of understeer rather than oversteer, and I think that's probably a little bit better in most circuits, but it can definitely be a little frustrating as you're trying to push as hard as you can, but the car just doesn't turn in, and it really just sets you up so poorly for the following corners that it's a little bit frustrating. So as we move forward here towards the end of lap 20, we find ourselves still here struggling with these medium tires. I think the lack of rubber on the ground and sort of the weather and the lack of temperature on the circuit from all of the rain in the first half of the race, we are really, truly struggling. And now we find ourselves with an angry bull behind us, with Max Verstappen setting the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. We are keeping a very close eye here on this extremely long opening straight. He will move to the outside, will defend the inside, sort of close the door on him a little bit on the outside, trying to hold him back as much as we can. We know that our race really isn't with the Red Bull, but knowing the amount of positives that could come from trying to hold him back as much as we can, we actually moved here to the side. I made a decision in the moment to not really fight him, and unfortunately we get very understeering and actually cut the corner, and we get a 3-second time penalty for running through the corner, even though we got a horrific exit and definitely caused us more issues than not. We get a 3-second time penalty, which is extremely unfortunate for us, as we were just trying to it was sort of a yo-yo situation where we were letting Max through, but he decided he didn't want to come through, and so we get a little too late on the brakes as we were expecting a Red Bull to come through on us, and we end up cutting the corner a little too much. And by a little too much, I mean very much, just slicing off the edge of it, and we get a 3-second time penalty, and now extremely flustered as we're looking at 15 laps remaining here. We actually almost touched the wall coming out of that last turn towards this opening straight, and now we need to settle in and come to terms with the fact that we have a 3-second time penalty, and now it's all about pushing to the absolute max and trying to be smart, but knowing that we need to put a little bit of time in between us as Max Verstappen finally comes through, almost like we wish he would have just one lap earlier. And it's going to be a long day from here, as now we find ourselves being passed by a Red Bull, now with the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz behind us, and both of which have a much better car than us. And so even though we were feeling good running in P7 for so long, seeing these two around us, now Max going around us and the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz coming up in our rear mirror, we know we are staring down P9 and very much even P10, as even the AlphaTauri car is much better in terms of the R&D chart and car performance. And so we very much could see ourselves falling all the way to a single World Drivers' Championship point and Constructors' point, to very possibly no points should things continue to not go our way, especially with this 3-second penalty that we're kind of carrying through. If the race were to end right now, we would fall all the way to P10, and we need to find a way to create a little bit of separation, while also recognizing that Ferrari is definitely going to come for us, and we need to try and decide nice and early, should we fight this or not? We know that we are not getting DRS from Max Verstappen ahead, so there's actually a potential strategic play here to let the Ferrari by and try and use him to kind of tug us along using DRS, but he was a little too far off to let him make the move here. So he'll actually go onto the inside and sort of just park himself right in the middle, and we actually run into the back and give him a bit of a bump draft. Thankfully, no more penalties for us. But now we find ourselves with a horrific exit from those corners. And now we find ourselves within the clutches of Pierre Gasly, with Kevin Magnussen, a little bit of a buffer there to the Haas of Kevin Magnussen there in P11, about 3 seconds. But the what we've seen so far, that 3 seconds is a lot longer and seems a lot closer than it actually is, considering we have a 3-second time penalty. And so it feels almost more like Kevin is only half a second to 0.6 of a second behind us. And so we'll move forward here to lap 24 of 36. We are continuing to chase around the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, and we actually managed to hold off Pierre Gasly as much as we could. But nonetheless, there's still a long way to go in this one. We are still carrying that 3-second time penalty, and we are doing everything we can to hold on to the DRS range of the Ferrari here. And we're going to get actually a pretty decent run in here down this main straight, and potentially think about making a move. As Carlos goes a bit defensive, we'll move back towards the outside, towards the racing line, actually pull just ahead. We'll slam on the brakes. Watch as Carlos comes through on the inside, where it runs a little wide. We go a little wheel to wheel there, getting a little bit of a bump draft, and we actually will carry through DRS onto this second straight. And so we actually will hold on to P8 here from the Ferrari. I wonder if he is carrying any potential minor damage or something, as our car really shouldn't be competing like this, especially with the Ferrari that the same Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, who's been running away with this drivers' championship, as well as helping along the constructors' championship along with Sainz this season. And so we're very, very surprised to see the amount of performance we've been able to see compared to the Scuderia driver, as this little X section we continue to struggle with as the car refuses to rotate through, and we actually are probably running very, very close to a bit of a track limits issue, and we definitely don't need any more issues with the FIA in this one. We don't need any more marshals giving us any more time penalties, as we're still carrying that 3-second time penalty. But now you can see as we round this final corner that gap to Pierre Gasly there in P10, 2.8 seconds as of right now. And so if we are able to pull away just slightly more, even with this 3 seconds, as we try and break the toe of Carlos Sainz, but that Ferrari is just a little too fast as he'll continue and just, cruise right by us here on the outside. We kind of squeeze him towards the racing line as they're trying to move back as quickly as we can. A little early on the brakes, as Sainz locks up, and we will take that every single day of the week as they make the move towards the inside, and we find ourselves once again back in P8, kind of battling a Ferrari. This definitely feels pretty good towards the end of the season. Only a few rounds left, and it is going to be a lot of fun here as we take a look at our tires, and they are looking very, very worn in terms of trying to go to the end of this one. And we're finally starting to realize that battling the Ferrari as much as we are is probably not the best thing to do here in terms of our long-term race. As much fun as it was to kind of battle, as you can see here, the car just does not want to stop. The tires doing ever so little to move us there as we actually get lucky here and cutting that corner. We don't receive any warning or any other penalties, but you can definitely make a case for it. As Kevin Magnussen actually DNFs from this session and drops out for one reason or another. I wonder if it's a mechanical issue, a power unit issue. I know this portion of the season is kind of rampant with them as drivers are trying to get every single last drop out of every single power unit component they can get. And so I wonder if Kevin's just had a little bit of enough. As you can see on the minimap there on the bottom left, that he seemed to have stopped right before the end of that opening straight, as this little left right just is refusing to cooperate with our car, and we just push right through it every time we try and turn in. But nonetheless, we are pushing extremely hard, just trying to hold on to the back of this Ferrari, as if we lose DRS here, we definitely run the risk of losing our position in that time gap to Gasly behind. As you can see, it's teetering right there on the edge of that 3 seconds. But we also know that is only a matter of time before Carlos Sainz leaves us for naught, and we will get the benefit of DRS here once again, hoping to continue to hold on to that 1 second gap here as we will move ahead now. Unfortunately, nothing more came from Carlos as he left us very cleanly in the dust, and we had a very lonely last few laps of this Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc, fresh off of winning and securing his World Drivers' Championship last episode in the Circuit of the Americas, wins the Mexican Grand Prix, continuing to dominate this season of F1. And now we get to turn our attention towards probably our most important gap of this session, as that gap behind to Pierre Gasly, as we are holding on to P9, currently sits at 4.6 seconds. And so as long as we don't make any major mistakes here through the last few corners, we will secure P9 here, even with our 3 second penalty, which is absolutely fantastic for us here in this fledgling F1 season, first F1 season here, as we'll take the nice inside line, trying to secure as best we can. We will cross the line in P9 here in Mexico City, bringing home a couple of constructors points for us. We're not really battling for any titles or any trophies or even the best of the rest, but we know that any point that we can pick up is a point we can look and point to for sponsors or potential investors in the team for the coming seasons, as we know that money talks in F1 and we are trying to survive here, especially as we near the end of our first season. As you can see, Charles Leclerc come home to win the Mexican Grand Prix. Looks like Lando Norris comes home in P3. The man who started, he didn't get pole, but he started from first position on the grid, comes home in P3. Congratulations to him. And I believe it was a Mercedes. It was hard to tell if it was of Lewis Hamilton or George Russell. And it will be George Russell to occupy the second step of the podium. And so a 3 constructor podium, which is always fun to see, especially in this day and age where it seems all too often that you'll see multiple drivers from the same team on the podium. So Charles occupies the top step, showering champagne here, and probably what was a wet and cold day in Mexico. But for us, a couple of World Drivers Championship and constructor points comes home with us as we near ever closer the ending of our first season here in F1. Only a few races left here. As you see there, we do confirm that we finish in P9, as we will scroll down to see how Piastri ends up finishing. I believe he ends up finishing towards the bottom half. He actually finishes up in P17, so up a couple positions for the young Australian. He continues to gain some valuable experience here. And so we will take a look at the standings as it stands now. Charles Leclerc has officially gotten the Drivers' Championship, and for the constructors, we currently sit in P7, but only 2 points separate us and Alfa Romeo in 6th position. So a lot to fight for here in these last few races, and definitely a lot on the table as well. We have a lot to fight for, and we look forward to fighting every single one. But that'll do it for us here in part 9, and I will see you guys in the next one.